Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the course of English for Academic Communication with me, Maria Dewi Rosari from Jakarta International University, Indonesia. Welcome to week 8 or chapter 8 or lecture 8. This is a continuation of lecture 7 that we had. In lecture 7, we are discussing about departmental presentation, and we discuss about mechanics of language, and then the effective use of language, and then also some other tips in handling challenges in departmental presentation. And now in lecture 8, we are still discussing the same thing, but with different sections. We are going to cover panel activity for experts and questioners. So actually, this is the further application. The further application of the mechanics of language and other materials that we learned in lecture 7. And although the title of this course is Panel Activity for Experts and Questioners, that's not going to be the one and only thing we discuss today. We are going to cover some other things, all right? And let's find out what are other things that we are going to cover in lecture 8. In the learning objectives of lecture 8. As you can see on the right side of your slide 2, there are four sections that we are going to cover in this lecture. The first one is introduction and review. So in the introduction, I will introduce you with what we are going to have in lecture 8. So you know what to expect, what to do, and then what you are supposed to cover in this lecture 8. And then there will also be review section. So the review section will include not all, but most of the mechanics of language we discussed in lecture 7. And this review section is actually the same with the one you had in the previous lectures. In every event meeting, you will always have review section, and that's aimed to briefly review the materials of the previous lecture before seeing the application of the material. And then in section number 2, there will be facing challenges and exploring hidden assumptions. So this will be a diagnostic test for you to help you analyze and be more aware of any challenges, any hidden assumptions that you usually use in a departmental presentation, in how to overcome common problems or issues in presentation. This is actually similar to the one you had previously. There will be several diagnostic questions for you to answer and to reflect on your past experience, of course, in giving presentation. And then in section 3, it will be application activities. So in this section, I provide you with 2 subsections, which are the first one, panel activity for experts and questioners. So in this section, you will be able to put into practice the materials of lecture 7. And then in 3.2, it will be self-assessment. So it will be more of like your self-reflection, how you assess yourself, your learning progress, your experience, your difficulties, your progress so far in learning the materials. And the last one is strategies for success. Although lecture 7 has covered some of tips and strategies too, we can call it that way, for tackling the challenges in departmental presentation, we still have many more strategies that we need to cover so that in the next time we have departmental presentation, we can deliver it more well. All right, so that's the bigger picture of what we are going to have in week 8, right? Now let's start with the very first section, which is about introduction and review. Let me introduce you with what lecture 8 is going to be about. Lectures 7 and 8 focus mainly on developing the ability to manage questions and answers in departmental presentations, that involve common activities such as making class presentations and defending proposals or theses. So the same like what I said in lecture 7, the materials, the skills, the knowledge that you see in lecture 7 and 8 are not only for classroom presentations or the presentations you have in one of your courses in university, but you can also use all those materials to prepare yourself for your thesis or proposal presentation or proposal defense later. Even you can use all the materials for later when you are at the professional work, when you need to provide your department presentation, you need to report something or present a project. So all the skills in lecture 7 and 8 are very beneficial for you. So the use of these materials are, a lot. In these situations, questions are usually more predictable because you are often dealing with an audience known to you in a somewhat controlled situation. Yeah, any class presentation, in a thesis proposal presentations, the situation, although it doesn't provide us with all the predictable situations, but they are still more predictable compared to giving a presentation in a forum from many institutions in which the members are not known because they are from other institutions or even other countries, right? So now talking about the mechanics of language that we covered in lecture 7, can you provide some uses of the mechanics of language learned in lecture 7? Can you pick some expressions from any types that you like, so you chose, and then can you show the application of them? Say you pick 1 or 2 expressions, and then can you use it, for example, welcoming your audience or to thank your audience, like that, and then you practice it. I'll give you 1 minute to do that. If you think you need more time, you can pause this video, stay on slide 3 until you're finished with it. Okay, if you're finished, let's continue. Let's move on. Now, before we go to the material of lecture 8, let's review the mechanics of language in lecture 7. The same thing that we have done so far, I will provide you with 8 expressions taken from any types of expressions in the mechanics of language in lecture 7. And I want you to match those expressions to the functions, their functions on the right. So there are 8 expressions written in black and 8 functions of them written in red. Can you match them? Please do not go to the next section. Do not go to the next slide, because the next slide will reveal the answer to you. So please make sure you do it yourself to review and also to refresh your memory about what we learned in lecture 7. But whenever you're ready, let's continue to the answer key. Please go to slide 5. Okay, let's start from number 1. Good morning and welcome to my presentation on. That's to welcome our audience in the beginning of our presentation, right? Welcoming, greeting them, to show that we are friendly, right? So they know that we are a friendly speaker, friendly presenter. Number 2, the purpose of my presentation is, what do you think? It's to introduce the subject or the topic of our presentation. You're telling the purpose, and it's talking about the subject or topic of the presentation. And then number 3, I'd like to start by, what do you think? It's still in the beginning of the presentation. What is the purpose of that expression? To warm up an audience, warming up, ice breaking for your audience. And then number 4, time does not allow me to cover all aspects of my research in 20 minutes. So I intend to focus on, what do you think? It's to explain the division of material. Right. Number 5, are there any questions? It's very easy, right? To invite questions in a Q&A session. And then number 6, thank you for your courteous attention. Thank you. That's really a signal. That's to thank your audience, to thank our audience. Number 7, next, let's move on to, it's very clear. This is the signal between sections of our presentation. And last one, that brings me to the end of my presentation, to provide a note of finality. Well, those are the expressions to review. And in this review section, if you want to have more reviews, you can do it yourself. Select some expressions and then ask yourself to guess the function of them. Or you can choose the name of the function, for example, to warm up an audience, let's say, and then ask yourself to provide some expressions that you can use for that. All right. Okay, let's move on to the next part, which is section 2. It's about facing challenges and exploring hidden assumptions, and get ready to answer some self-reflection questions. So this can be done for 2 purposes. Can be for your self-study or can be for your classroom instruction. It's actually up to you. There are, if I'm not mistaken, 4 questions, but there are sub-questions in number 4 later. And you can adjust it to your need. If your meeting, length of your meeting doesn't allow to have such a long discussion, so you may pick some of the questions. Right, because these questions require a long time to answer and a long time to reflect on someone's self and later to share with others. Okay, now let's see the questions from question number 1. Consider the various cross-cultural dimensions that you have explored in previous units. For example, small, large power distance, high-low tolerance of ambiguity, and feminine, masculine dominated cultures. How might these dimensions affect how one approaches presenting and answering questions in academic setting? So our focus is about departmental presentations, but to be more specific, we are not about how to compose a speech or presentations from the opening and then content and then closing, but it's more about tackling the questions in the presentation and using the cross-cultural dimensions that we discussed in the beginning of this course, which is in lecture 1 and lecture 2. So how will you use that knowledge in analyzing how someone can differently approach question and answer session in academic setting? That's for question number 1. If you have more time to answer question number 1, pause this video and you can continue it again later. But here is question number 2 for those who already finished with question number 1. Share with your group how you assess yourself in terms of your personal or cultural beliefs or expectations that influence your approach or pattern in presenting and answering questions in departmental presentations. Provide personal experiences or examples. So in question number 1, it's about your general idea about how the cross-cultural dimensions affect someone's approaches in Q&A session. But now it's about you. How do you assess yourself in the way you can approach questions in departmental presentations based on your personal belief, your cultural belief? So you and your friends come from different cultural background may have different answers, and that's the interesting part of the section. Let's move on to question number 3. What are some personal difficulties that you face or anticipate facing in fielding questions during departmental presentations? For example, giving progress reports, making class presentations, or defending proposals or thesis. It's still about you, still about your personal experiences. What are your personal difficulties, especially about anticipating questions in your presentation? All right. Don't forget to provide real examples, okay, and share it with your classmates. If you use this for a self-study, it's not possible to share with someone, but with you writing down your answers, reflecting your personal experience, it's a good note, and it will be a good reminder for yourself, especially when you want to track your learning progress in English for academic communication. Okay, and question number 4 is about fielding questions. Explore with your speaking partners some strategies that you can use to handle the following types of questions that you are likely to encounter during the question and answer sessions that occur in departmental presentations. Be sure to consider both the strategies. How would you deal with the situation, and also language? What would you say exactly that you can employ when handling each of the following situations? Work in pairs and write down what will you say for each situation. So there will be situations given to you, and I would like to know your strategies and language, how you will deal with it, and what would you say in that kind of situation. Okay, the situations here are actually the ones we discussed in lecture 7. Here we are. Situation 1. What would you do and what would you say when you're asked you will cover later question? Situation number 2. When you are in an off the subject question, what would you do and what would you say? Take your time to answer these questions. I understand that these questions will, ask you a long time to answer, and that's okay. You pause this video and stay on slide 8. But whenever you're ready, let's go to slide 9 to see the next situations. Situation 3. When you're asked a stupid question, what would you do? What would you say? What would you say to the questioner, and what would you do? What would you work with, your facial expression, your body gesture, so that even though you think that the question is stupid, but you won't, offend the questioner. Situation number 4. What would you do? What would you say if you're asked a limited interest questions? If you are not sure what kind of question it is, you can check lecture 7 to see what is a limited interest question. Let's continue. Situation number 5. A rambling or long-winded question, a pretty familiar situation. What would you do and what would you say if you're asked that kind of question? If you and your friends don't share the same answers, that's okay. That's something interesting about this part, about this section, right? We can see how other people will tackle this part, how other friends may see and do in overcoming this kind of situation, and that will be interesting. Sometimes we can even find, like an aha moment when we listen to other people in the way they tackle that kind of situation. And then situation number 6, a multi-question question, a question that has question and has another question inside it. So what would you do and what would you say if you're asked that kind of question. So in these kinds of questions, this kind of situations, it is important that you make the effort to write down what you would say, so that you have the basis for noticing the gap between your linguistic choices and the linguistic choices of your peers or your instructors that may be more effective in specific situations. So even though you and your friends have different answers in the way you do and say that kind of situation, was that the goal. Maybe the difference will enlighten us, will give us more preference in how to select a more effective way to handle that kind of situation. All right, let's see the next one. Situation number 7, I don't understand or need more time to think question. In the kind of situation when you are asked that kind of question, what would you do and what would you say? What would you do can involve the way you act, the way you work with your body gestures, the way you work with your facial expressions. And what would you say is the expressions or maybe any statements that you think you will say when you are asked that kind of question. Okay, and there is one note. What are some other challenges identified in question 3? Together, brainstorm some strategies to help you overcome them. So after you discuss with your friends or your peer about what they will say, they will do in such a situation, can you think of some strategies that you can use to overcome that kind of situation? Maybe your friends has a strategy that you have never thought of, or vice versa. Maybe your friend has never thought of any strategy from what you mentioned to them. All right, everyone. So that's about facing challenges and exploring hidden assumptions section. There are 4 questions, but question number 4 is a multi-question question, because inside it there are 7 situations that you need to answer. All right. Okay, so for the next one, we are moving to the next section, which is section 3 about the application activities. We have 2 application activities. The first one is panel activity for experts and questioners, and the number 2 is the self-assessment. Let's find out first the first application activities for panel activity for experts and questioners. So this activity extends the panel discussions activity introduced in lecture 4. I hope that you still remember. If you forget it already, you may go back to lecture 4 to find out what the activities is or what the panel discussion is about. Assign another short article that has currently relevance to the academic community or a short research article of public interest that students from various disciplines can understand and discuss. So I already selected an article for you. If you are an instructor that is going to use this activity for your classroom instruction, just print it out and then distribute it to your students. If you're using it as a self-study material, so just read it, okay? Read it, and I will provide you with the procedure on how to use the article later. This time, randomly divide the class into 2 groups, 1 expert group and 1 questioner group, or reverse the role that each individual played the last time for the purpose of practicing fielding questions. So, so you assign your students, divide the students into 2, 1 as the expert, the other one as the questioner, or you can just use the same grouping but reverse role. If the students played expert group in the panel discussion, assign them to be questioner group and vice versa. Okay, but if you're using this as a self-study, you have no choice. You have to play those 2 roles, right? First, please play as an expert group, and the next one as the questioner group. It will, take a longer time for you to complete, but that's okay. It's even, trains you to be more skillful. You know how to be expert group and you know how to be questioner group, right? That sounds great. Okay, let's continue. Before I reveal to you the article, I'll show you the procedure first. The first one is preparation period for 20 minutes, okay? And this is what the expert group needs to do. Read the article and anticipate questions that the questioner group might raise. Group members might consider designating different members to be responsible for responding to certain aspects of the article. For example, the methodology, findings, interpretation, recommendations, and so on. But the article that I chose is not a research article. It's more of a website article, but you can still, recommend this step to your students. So for the expert group, ask them to do job splitting. Which member should cover which part of the article? So each of them will be responsible for a certain part of the article, or to be expert in a certain part of the article. By doing so, the group can ensure that there is a balance in participation and contributions among members, and members can practice refining how those anticipated questions will be answered. So by doing the job splitting, member A will be section A, for example, member B section B, and etc. So we can make sure, we as the teacher or instructor can make sure that everyone has a responsibility. Everyone has a part to be responsible with. Someone has, a task, and to make sure that everyone has a balance. Balanced task, right? So there won't be one member who, just chill, and then a member who is so busy preparing for the activity. And for expert groups, you can make a handout, printed handout like that, or worksheet like that, for them to list down the questions that may be asked by the questioner group. Okay, or you can just simply ask them to list down the questions that they want to anticipate in their book or on a piece of paper like that. Ask them to come up with as many questions as possible, and also ask them to, to try to predict the answers of those questions. That's why we call it anticipation of questions. If we are using this for a self-study, read the article in the next slide. I will show it to you later. And if you are an expert group, what kind of questions will you anticipate from questioner? So you are the expert means you are the expert of the content of the article, or you are the author of the article. You should know the content of the article. And can you predict, when you present that kind of article to someone else, what can probably be your audience's questions? And try to prepare yourself in answering that question. And then this is for the questioner group. This is what questioner group needs to do. Randomly assign individuals to be responsible for generating questions that corresponds to each of the 6 challenging situations. So there are a lot of challenging situations. You can ask them to act or to, play a role on those various situations, not only just one challenging situation used. And then during the process of generating challenging questions, keep in mind the content that you learned and practiced in previous lectures about asking questions. So please use the mechanics of language about asking questions, okay? And when later you need to address your questions to the expert group, you know what to say and how to do that. And for the questioner group, please provide this handout. But if you are Was if you're using this as a self-study, so be the questioner. Read the article and generate some questions that you want to ask, or make questions in which was that the content of the questions are the ones you want to know more from the expert group. You can provide your students with a printout of the handout for this one, questions about the article, or you can just ask them to write it on a piece of paper or in their book. So that's for the preparation period, okay, for 20 minutes for both groups. But if you're using this as self-study, you may take more than 20 minutes, and that's okay. Just take your time because it's all for you and about you. Now let's see the article that we are going to use for this panel activity for experts and questioners. So I chose the article. It's entitled "Social Media is Doing More Harm Than Good." There are 3 slides about this. So this one, and this one. It's taken from www.commonsensemedia.org. It is impossible to put all the contents of the article on those 3 slides. So I summarized them. If you think you want to use the full content of the article, you may go to this website and use that, the whole content of it, for your classroom instruction. And if you're using that for your self-study and you want to use a longer article, you may use that the full article on that website too. So instead of using the summary of the article from me in here, you can find the full one on that website. But if you want to use the summarized article, the shorter version that I made here, you may. Well, actually, I just deleted some paragraph just to make it more concise and more, doable and manageable for classroom instruction and for your self-study, right? So in short, this article is talking about social media that is, provide more disadvantages than advantages. So it's a very debatable topic, I know. And the author of this article, provides a lot of facts, evidences, even, research on that to support their arguments, right? So I hope that this article can trigger a lot of questions from the questioner group, and I hope that the expert groups can prepare themselves better. If you think you need more references in preparing yourself to face the questions from the questioner group, please do so. Read more articles, read more references, so that you are, more credible, right? Our audience can see that we are a credible speaker if we can be knowledgeable. In becoming knowledgeable, we need to read more books, articles related to the topic that we are going to discuss, right? So for all the questions, both expected and unexpected, we are ready to face that. So for the article, please find it on slide 15 up to 17, okay? And you can print it out and then distribute it to your students, or you can just send it in the form of PDF, and they can access this from their cell phones. So anything that works for you, okay? And then guide your students in making their questions, or in preparing their anticipation questions. If you're using this for your self-study, so take your time, take your enough time, as long as you need to be the expert group for the anticipation questions, and also for the questioner group for the questions that you want to ask to the expert group. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that's all for the preparation period for what the questioner group needs to do and the questioner needs to do. And now we move on to the next stage of this application activity, panel activity for expert and questioners, and it is question period for more or less 30 minutes. Well, the length of time, it's adjustable. according to the situation of your class and to your needs as well. If you're using this as a self-study, so you may take as long as you need because it's all about you. But for classroom instruction, you may adjust the length of time and also the things to do in every stage of this activity based on the condition of the class. So adjust accordingly. For this question period, what you need to do is as the following. Start the 10-minute question period, much like any question and answer session after a departmental presentation. So I know that the name of the lecture, which is about the application activity of lecture 7, is departmental presentation. But the main skill that we learned in this lecture is about the question and answer session. So it's not about like how to construct a departmental presentation from the opening stage and then the content and then the closing stage, but it's for the Q&A session. That's why for the challenges, for the tips, and also the strategies are all about how to tackle the Q&A session, right? So start this stage, the question period, by 10-minute question session, just like how Q&A session is was conducted after a presentation. And then once the question period is complete, both the expert and questioner groups will reflect on their performance and share the reflections about challenges, discoveries, and successes with the class. So although this reflection is not directly related to the students' communication skills, but it is something important because through this kind of session, they need to reflect on their performance. They need to see how they performed so far and what they think they can do better for the next speaking event, right? So after the question period, please invite your students to reflect, to do self-reflection, and I'll provide you with the guidelines on how to do the self-reflection later. So the expert group will reflect on how they perform as expert group. For questioner group, they need to reflect on how they perform as questioner group. And after that, what we need to do is reverse the role. Reverse the role that each individual plays so that every student can practice both asking and responding to questions and reflect on their challenges and successes after carrying out the activity. So after the reflection is done, reverse the role, do it again, right? So students who previously acted as expert group now do the questioner group role. And then do the same thing. They need to experience both sides. But if you are using this as self-study, you already experience at both sides, right? But you still need to do self-reflection too. This reflection is about your challenges and what you think was successful during your performance. And the reflection will be like this. So you can provide a handout, right? A handout for them to write down their reflection, and then you can ask them to share it with their friends, to share with their peers, and you can also ask them to give feedback to each other based on how they performed earlier. So you can repeat that, like first session, someone will be a questioner, and then someone will be the expert group, and then reflection, and then swap roles, and then reflection again. But if that is not doable in your classroom, you can just do the first session. So just do the first stage. Someone become half of the class become the expert, another half becomes the questioner, and then reflection, and that's all. That's also doable too. Okay, so that's the application activity, the first one about panel activity for experts and questionnaires. The next one, we are moving on to the next application activities, which is about self-assessment. So this is applicable for both self-study or a take-home task. Here is what you need to do. First, videotape yourself or have someone videotape you delivering a 10-minute talk describing your research project. If a research is something too heavy for your students, you may change it with a certain article, or maybe your students writing pieces that they made like last semester or last week. That's also doable too. Complete the worksheet and share it with family member, friend, or colleague who would be interested in offering you feedback. So what they need to do is to videotape themselves speaking, just 10 minutes long. For classroom instruction, this is the next what's that procedure. So if you are using this in a classroom, what you need to do, instead of asking the students to videotape themselves, ask them to prepare 5 to 10 minute talk, right? The length of the talk depends on the situation of your class, and videotape each student practicing the delivery of the 5 to 10 minute talk in class. Or to shorten the time, you can ask each other to videotape each other speaking. The talk is a description of his or her research project or a few key concepts in the student's field. Also, the research project can be replaced with other tasks or other articles or the student's pieces of writing. And then ask the students to complete the following self-assessment sheet for the next class, or to share their discoveries with his or her peers in class. So for this application activity, it's not only teachers or instructors who can use it, but you who are using this material for your self-study, it's also doable too. Or if you're using this material, but instead of doing or executing the activity in the class, you assign this as a take-home task. So this is this activity is applicable for many situations. Next one, try viewing the tape at least 3 times, each time focusing on a different aspect of the speaking, your body language, focal image, and verbal image. And then answer the following questions before moving on to the next section. So before asking the student to complete the worksheet, explain to them that they need to view the tape at least 3 times, and each time they need to focus on different aspects. Please explain about what body language should be, viewed or should be observed, what is focal image, and what is verbal image. So provide some guidelines too if you think your students need that. Okay. So the questions are as the following. Number 1, what, if anything, surprised you as you watch your presentation clip? So surprising in terms of the body language, in terms of the focal image, and in terms of verbal image. So it's done 3 times. Every question should be answered in those 3 aspects. And number 2, what did you notice about your nonverbal language? What aspects of your nonverbal image would you like to improve? So it's really self-reflection, the students assessing themselves. Although they are assessing themselves, they can still get confused too. So it's our responsibility as an instructor or teachers to provide more guidelines and explanation on how to do this self-assessment. The next one, what did you notice about the focal qualities of your talk? What aspects of your focal image would you like to improve? So guide the students to plan some strategies for themselves. So they First, they are encouraged to analyze their problems, their difficulties, but after that, they also need to know what to do next for their performance. And then number 4, comment on the use of language in your talk. What have you noticed? What aspects would you like to improve? Next one, number 5. Comment on the structure and content of your talk. What would you like to change or improve? Now about the structure and content of the student's talk. Previously, it's about the use of language. The previously in number 3 is focal qualities, right? So although the questions sound similar, but they are focusing on different aspects. And last one, number 6. Overall, what do you like about your talk? Please identify 3 or more strengths you notice from watching the clip. So encourage the students that despite all, all the things that they need to improve in their talk, they need to find out at least 3 things that they think are already good about their talk. There must be a lot of things that they have been able to do well. For some students, they feel a bit reluctant to mention what they have done well. So we need to provide encouragement that they need to do that, because it is very impossible for a performance or a talk that only consists of, weaknesses, and only weaknesses. No, there must be something good, at least something good. But I believe that there are more than just 3 good things about the student's performance. Well, that's the end for section 3 about application activities, about the questionnaire and expert group, and also this one about self-assessment. The next one, we are entering the very last section of lecture 8, which is about strategies for success. Well, actually, in the previous lecture, in lecture 7, we covered the basic effective use of language. That can also be considered as, the strategies for success too. And then the types of challenging questions that we may encounter during Q&A session in a departmental presentation, that can also be strategies for success too. But now let's see other strategies for success. So it's about tips on successfully handling audience questions. So again, lecture 7 and 8 focus more on how to handle questions instead of constructing a presentation or speech. Here we go. First, consider every question an opportunity to clarify or emphasize your key points, to strengthen your ideas, and to convey your passion about your area of expertise. So although you may be asked about a stupid question or a rambling question, long-winded question, we still need to respect that, because every question asked can be a good opportunity for us to clarify our important points of the presentation, and also to show our passion about the area of our expertise. Here are some strategies to keep in mind for answering questions professionally. These strategies apply not only to departmental presentations, but are also highly applicable and relevant to presentation in other academic venues. So it's not limited, the application of these strategies is not limited to just presentation or just departmental presentation. You can even use it for your leader at work when you already graduate and you need to work in a professional setting. That's still applicable too. Let's find out the strategies. Number 1, preparation, and preparation. First, anticipate questions that may come up. Although the questions in Q&A session is unpredictable, but we can still prepare ourselves to anticipate any possible questions. In the process of trying to answer some or all of your questions, you will gain knowledge. So just like what the questionnaire group did in the application activity, try to predict questions that you think you need to anticipate and try to answer it by yourself. there is always a possibility for the questions that you anticipate to really be addressed in the Q&A session. You will increase your self-confidence in responding to both expected and unexpected questions. So with more preparation, you will have more confidence in overcoming any type of questions, including the unexpected ones. That's for number one about preparation. Then number two, listen. What do we need to listen? Why do we need to listen? Listen carefully to the entire question before you begin to answer it, including a question that is long, right? So try to listen carefully, try to grasp the overall message of the question before we really start to answer the question. If we don't do that, we can end up misunderstand the question and address it incorrectly. Number three, pause. It's okay to provide some pause before we really answer the question. Think before responding. We can even use visual aids when we are giving some pauses. For example, blackboard, whiteboard, or flip chart, or anything available in the room of your presentation to help you answer the question. So first, by doing this, you give yourself time to answer the questions, and also you give yourself time to construct your answer in a well-structured way. Number four, repeat or paraphrase the question. So this strategy serves several purposes. First one, for a large audience, this ensures that the entire audience hears the question. It's important that everyone hears the question. Otherwise, the answer you provide may not make sense to those who didn't catch what has been asked. So even though the questioner is, very well spoken, there is always a possibility for some audience in your room that do not catch the key point of the question. So that's why it's important to repeat or paraphrase the question. And by repeating or paraphrasing the question, we actually also provide ourselves a time to think about the answers or the response, right? So by doing one thing, we can benefit two things at least. It lets you check your understanding of the question. So another benefit, when you have not completely understood the question, the person asking often will rephrase or elaborate further upon the question. So by paraphrasing the question asked to you, it also gives opportunity for the questioner to make sure that their question is accepted precisely. If not, then they will, they will elaborate it or paraphrase it or deliver it in a different wordings or statements. If you have understood the question, it will allow you some additional time to evaluate the question and to formulate a response, right? And the last one, this also gives everyone time to think about the question and possibly respond to it. So by paraphrasing the questions, you are actually also giving your audience time to think of the answer of the questions just asked. And when you are answering it, there is a possibility that your audience will also help you in answering that. Maybe they will add up, more stories based on their experience that, that provides more insight to the issue being discussed. Number 5, paraphrase negative questions. We know that negative questions is not good to be asked in a Q&A session, but it's still possible to happen. So that's why we need to paraphrase the negative questions. And we should not repeat a negative question. Instead, paraphrase it. For example, of the paraphrasing it, So your question concerns the fundamental postulate and self-reporting method used for my research. Let me clarify them. So by clarifying, you are actually paraphrasing it or stating the question in different wording. Ask your own question. You may ask your own question for elaboration. For example, could you provide an example? Could you provide the context? Number 7, ask the questioner. So the questioner asks your question and ask her or him back. Ask the questioner about his or her thoughts or perspective. So you're like asking the question back to the one asking it. As we all know, we often have an idea or position about the question before we ask it, right? And this is also applicable when you think you need more time to provide response. So ask the questioner about his opinion or his argument. While listening to them, you can give yourself enough time to think of your own response. Number 8, answer directly and honestly. Answer the questions as best as you can. Your answer should be concise and precise. Being concise means brief, and being precise is to the point. Previously, what we discussed is that we are not supposed to ask question that is long-winded, right? And we, as the presenter, the one who answered the question, is also not supposed to provide a rambling or long-winded answer too, because that's not going to be effective. And that can confuse our audience too. So make sure that we answer it in a concise and precise way. Number 9, beware of your nonverbal language. So remember that when we are talking in front of a lot of people, we are not only speaking or talking by our words. There are so much more about us that also talk at the same time. Our facial expression, our body gestures, our hand movement, they also convey message. So we really need to be aware of our nonverbal language. For example, show you are listening by nodding and making eye contact, right? So when we are talking and our speaking partner is nodding or making eye contact with us, we feel listened, and they are communicating something with us even without saying any word, right? So make sure that we mind our words, of course. Don't speak negatively or rudely, but we also need to, mind our body gestures and everything that is nonverbal, because sometimes the nonverbal things speak more than our verbal language. So we really need to be careful, especially if the presentation involves people from various cultures or various countries whose culture are different, or there is a cross-cultural situation. Next one, check the answers you just gave. After responding, you may want to check to see if you have really answered the question by saying something like the following. Well, sometimes there is a doubt in us whether or not we have really answered the question, and that's okay to make sure that we really have answered the question. One of the examples to do that is as the following. Does that answer your question? Was that what you were asking? Is that the kind of information you were seeking? And then the questioner will respond, and if they think you have covered the question well and they say yes, and then thank you. If not, then they will just provide more elaboration of their question and asking for further response from you. But regardless, it's okay to recheck the answer that we just gave. Number 11, postponing after the presentation or delaying to response after your presentation is finished. If after 2 or 3 attempts, you still have not answered the question to the questioner's satisfaction, and others can seem to help answer it, Then suggest getting together after your presentation. Remember that presentation time and also Q&A session are always conducted in limited time, scheduled time. So the time is very tight, especially if it is in a big conference like that. So make sure that we are not wasting time. Make sure that we are not, just spending time in answering one certain question that, very hard to satisfy, right? So after 2-3 attempts and still not yet covered, so invite the questioner to have a further discussion with you after your presentation. By doing that, we can cover more audience, more questions. For example, I suggest that we get together after the presentation and we can talk more specifically about this. So you can use that statement or your own wording. Number 12, have a pen and a paper available. It's very important, although we're now very attached to technology. Why so? Let's see. Jot down keywords, phrases, or questions that you cannot answer. Promise to get back to the person and do get back to him or her. When we encounter issues or questions that are difficult and we need time to really find the response, so we can use pen and paper to jot down the keywords or any phrases from the questions and say to the questioner that we will get back to the person when you arrive at the section of the presentation that covered the question or when you are already ready with your response. And do get back to him or her. Don't just promise. Okay. Number 13, involve the whole audience. This can be done through eye contact with the entire audience while you are answering questions and not just speaking to the questioner the entire time. So although say question A is asked by person A, the question can also be the questions of other audience too. So when you are answering questions, make sure that you are also, considering the presence of other participants or considering, other audience in your room. So you are not supposed to talk to the person who asked you, but talk to others too. Talk to the audience, other audience too. They may have the same questions, but this just person A who got the chance to address the question. 14, maintain the same delivery style. Avoid having two distinct delivery styles, one poised and confident. For example, the portion of your talk that you were able to rehearse, your presentations, especially, you can rehearse it as many times as you can, and you feel very confident about that. And the other one is distinctively lacking confidence. For example, the question and answer session, when you're dealing with unknown audience members or unfamiliar questions. So you will always have two sessions. First, material delivery, the one that you can always rehearse as many as you want or need, right? But then the Q&A session, the second session, is something that you can rehearse. Well, we can predict the question though, but we cannot really know what will really happen in the Q&A session. So please make sure that the delivery style, the confidence, the way we talk, the way we use our body gestures, the way we use our body movement, facial expressions are the same. Don't be so confident in the first session and, like scared and not confident in the second session. That will not look good and your overall performance will be ruined. And last one, number 15, avoid saying this will be our last question. Wow. Why so? This limits your opportunity to take another questions if your attempt in answering the final question was less than satisfactory. Always try to end your presentation on a positive note when possible. So do not end it with such statement. This will be our last question. It sounds not friendly, sounds not a good speaker or a good presenter, right? Try to leave a good impression especially at the end of your presentation, so that you will be remembered as a good speaker and a positive speaker. Right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the last one, the 15 strategies for success. I hope that the mechanics of language and then the application activities and strategies for success can assist you in your next speaking event when you need to take a part in a departmental presentation, especially in the Q&A section. If you want to read more about today's material, you can go to this book, and those pages, I already specified the pages, so you can directly go to that page, right? And the additional reference is for the article that we use for application activities. It's a wrap then. So that's the end of lecture 8. I'm so happy that I can accompany you until lecture 8 about departmental presentation. And in lecture 9 and 10, we will have one same topic, but for lecture 9, the same, it will be mechanics of language, and 10 will be about the application activities like that. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lecture with the new topic. Keep practicing, and I hope you a good success in your next speaking event. Goodbye, and I'll see you soon.